Go.
Alright, prepping. We're talking about prepping when it comes to molding, and you have to prep whatever it is before you make a mold in order to make that casting come out correctly and actually look well, so you don't have much cleanup when you pull them. I made this mold of my hand and pulled a casting of it, and it had air bubbles and a little bit of flaws in the nails and so forth. So I had to put red clay into it and fill in holes, fix dents, dings, the fingers were a little flattened, reconstruct the nail, so forth, as you can tell. If I was to make a mold of this and then make castings of it, it would have all of these flaws in it and look like poo, so it would be the point. After now that I've done this, I can then go and do this to it. I've prepped this gun. If you can tell, there's a red wax, maroon wax, up inside of these gaps. There's one in the trigger, and then if you were to come over here into the other side, the front of the gun, you can tell inside here that there is red. Before even anything was done, would be your maroon wax that you see inside of here. There's maroon wax filling a gap. This piece here to this piece here, there's a little space in between all of here that needed to be filled. It was basically a hollow, empty, negative space where, in all reality, it should be flat. So I filled it in, and in duplicating this, I'm yammering, and this is the point of why we need to take it. This is what we're talking about. Inside here is what we're talking about around the trigger. As easy and as well as even this line right here. There's some red wax in there to seal that up. A big hole and a major spot was right here on this. Bring it this way a little bit so you can see it. Now it's here and also in the front of the gun, but it's a little difficult to see with this wall. Even in the front of the mag, there. That spot right there, there's wax. Okay. Wax as well. The reason for doing this is so that way when you pour your silicone rubber into this area, it doesn't seep inside any of these cracks or inside that part, and then therefore your air bubbles are coming out, and you're not molding that area in the first place, and you can actually release it. Once you've got all that prepping done, you lay it down and you set up your first layer. The first layer factor can be done in many different ways. I'm going to start off with your perfect classic easy example of if you have a project and you'd like to make a mold of it. This is a block mold per se. You put a casing around it and you'll cut it out. This is a skull and this is the jawbone to the skull. I will pour the silicone rubber into here, and thus before that I did a seal job with the clay around here, so that way this cup won't move or lift off when you pour the silicone rubber in here. I have prepped channels. For instance, if you come back to this, it's much more easier to see. These right here would be your pour spouts. This is the creating negative space here, so when I pour the silicone into this area, this space will be not filled with silicone, so you can there pour the plastic into here, or the medium that you use to fill up the gun. These little clear things right here are called keys. You can also tell that I dug into the clay and made little channels in spots where I couldn't get these round keys to be. This is so that way when after you're done with this half and then you pour the other half and you pulled this all apart and then you pull it and you go and set it up to do the other half, your other half has a married position. It won't slide apart. It's I guess the best way to explain it is you put two flat surfaces together and press really hard, you're going to get slippage. If those two flat spots have dents or indents on them, and say it's like this, in other words keys, and you press really hard and try to move, they're not going anywhere. This will happen with a smooth surface, and if you press too hard you'll get it and it'll slip, and you'll notice when you pull a casting your gun actually looks like two halves put together. So that's what all these little keys are going to prevent. So really the next process after this is pouring the silicone rubber, which I can do later. But this process right here is also the most important. This took me almost 8 hours to do. building these walls, laying all these keys, and literally getting it so everything was seamless up against the edge. Finding your seam is another big thing when it comes to prepping. A lot of people like to put the seam line directly in the center of the gun. It makes it easier, there's less time involved. The reason why this took me 7.5 hours is there's multiple levels in this. There's a level in the trigger guard, it dips down here. This is different height than this. This is a different height than this, as well as this, as well as this, and so forth and so on. So I made the clay adjust to every single one. If you can see right inside here, for instance, it raises and then drops because this thing is higher than this. So it drops all the way around and then actually raises back up into this section, but then drops back down into this section, and so forth. It does that all the way around this gun, and it's, I guess, most outstanding right here by this clip. The trigger guard here goes around, but then I drop it down past this little knob to the full landing right there, to this base, and then it goes down to the base of that. The reason why I did it is because I want my seam line to be along the edge of the gun, not in the halfway point. There's less cleanup to do, and you already are on a line. It's like putting a line in the center of a piece of paper versus putting the line on the edge of the paper. Less cleanup, taking away less material and so forth. So that's just where I prefer to have it. To each his own.